James Melendez, James the Wine Guy. Stay tuned for a review of these beautiful wines. This is Barboursville from Virginia. These are Cabernet Franc, so stay tuned. So here we go. We have some beautiful wines before us. And first of all, before I introduce these beautiful wines, actually I'm going to have Frank Morgan from Drink What You Like. Now he is a blogger that I met in Virginia several years ago. He is a foremost, in my opinion, an expert when it comes to Virginia wines. So I definitely want to introduce Frank, and it's a delight to have you here. We just saw each other in Santa Barbara for the Wine Bloggers Conference 14. Thank you again for being here today.
James, I appreciate you having me. It's an honor to be here. I've been a big fan of your videos, your wine videos, for quite a while. I'm glad to be here and talking about not only Barboursville Vineyards and Winery, but also the Virginia wine industry. Right now, I believe that Virginia wine as an industry as a whole is at a very special place. We're at that tipping point, or the momentum point, if you will. The last 2 years have been pretty big years for the wine industry, or watershed years, as some would say, in terms of just recognition and credibility. Most major wine publications, international and national, have featured Virginia wine, whether it's some Food and Wine or even the Wall Street Journal. Jancis Robinson has raved about some of our wineries, including Barboursville Vineyards, Wall Street Journal as well. So many major international and national publications have in fact featured Virginia wine. So in terms of credibility, the industry is growing, and I believe that Virginia wine as a whole has made bigger steps in the last 5 years than many industries, than most wine industries have around the world. And that's because it's been a perfect storm of a lot of great positive factors. One is our state government really supports Virginia wine, from our previous governor to our current governor. The Virginia Wine Board Marketing Office has done a fantastic job of connecting consumers and media and vintners and spreading the word that way. And of course, Virginia wine makers themselves, the pioneers like Luca Pasquina and Gabriele Roussi, Dennis Horton, Jim Law, Jeff White, the real pioneers, all the work they did over the last 2 to 3 decades, finding what grapes work and what vineyard sites and what regions has really paid off. And we have a new crop of young winemakers that have benefited or leveraging that winemaking expertise. So Virginia wine has grown considerably, and it's growing in credibility and finally in recognition. And of course, we have Barboursville Vineyards that has a very deep history and is one of the most notable vineyards and wineries in the state of Virginia.
Yeah, I have heard some amazing things about just visiting. I have yet to visit Barboursville. I will someday, but it really has a great focus of food and great wine culture. Based on the Zonin family, who had the pioneering spirit of founding Barboursville Winery. I think that they've just really done an outstanding job. And in terms of what what I often say is that we think of Washington, California, Oregon. We think sometimes of New York a little bit. But Virginia needs to be in that top recognition point, in my opinion, because these are just gorgeous wines. And as I saw earlier, you saw me take a little taste. I had to. This wine is just so compelling. So we're going to talk about these wines in a moment. But these are fantastic Cabernet Franc. And I often say, you might be skeptical, but until you have a taste, tasting's believing.
Glad to be tasting 3 vintages of Barboursville Cabernet Franc Reserve with you. This is the 08, 09, and 2010. A little bit different years, but glad to taste these and introduce your viewership to Barboursville. It's a vineyard and winery that has a deep history. It was one of the first in Virginia. The land was acquired by the Zonin family, Johnny Zonin, in 1976, and they started planting right away, planted a lot of vineyards then, and have gotten smarter as the years went on. And in 1990, Luca Pasquina came from Italy, and he has been the winemaker and general manager at Barboursville since then, and has really helped raise Barboursville as one of the premier wineries anywhere on the East Coast.
Okay, when I went to Wine Bloggers Conference in Charlottesville a few years ago, this is the first table I went to, and it was by purpose, it was by design. I said I need to taste Barboursville, and especially Octagon, because that really has high accolades. And then tasting, I did taste Bro, and that was about 5 years ago. And that was my first time to ever taste a Virginia wine. And so what do I go after that? I go for Cabernet Franc. And Cabernet Franc is, I'll be Franc with Franc, if you will, or vice versa. It's really one of these wine varieties I think has some really great growing regions in the U.S. and around the world. I think Virginia really hit head on now when it really just dove deeply, if you will, into Cabernet Franc compared to other varieties in there. But I think the Zonin family has really had great forethought and mission. I've been to their Masseria Altamura in Puglia, and I just thought they just really are one step above or ahead, shall I say, of the wine community, bringing these really beautiful wines to the marketplace. So very excited about Cabernet Franc, and I would like to know your perspective in terms of why Cabernet Franc is so suited to Virginia.
I think that first the climate there is a challenging climate in Virginia, and it varies by region, of course, like Santa Barbara County, where we just left a few days ago. One of the things that struck me about Santa Barbara County is how diverse it is from Ballard Canyon to Happy Canyon. And Virginia is like that in the sense that it's so diverse, from the coastal plains up to Northern Virginia and Loudoun County to the Piedmont region in Charlottesville. And I think that Cabernet Franc just does well because it seems to thrive in Virginia's hot, humid climate. If a grape does thrive there, Cabernet Franc seems to be doing quite well. And you mentioned some other varieties. There's over 50 varieties currently grown for wine production in Virginia right now. Cabernet Franc is the most planted red grape variety. Chardonnay is overall the most planted variety in Virginia, followed by Cabernet Franc and then Merlot. So Vitis vinifera still is the king. And
in terms of white wines, I've identified Virginia as being a Viognier state, but there are other white varieties that are being produced there. But is that the showcase wine of Virginia, white wine?
It is. Virginia, although again Chardonnay is the most planted, Viognier is not too far behind in terms of white grape varieties. But in 2011, the Virginia Wine Board, along with the other groups in Virginia, designated Viognier as the state's official state grape for marketing purposes. So that is the official state grape. It's been about 3 years, and there's a lot more plantings going on in Virginia. And one of the biggest challenges in Virginia, of course, is the climate, because there is no typical vintage. Weather is all over the place. Lots of disease pressures when you have high heat, high humidity, especially high nighttime temperatures. So right now, Viognier is Virginia's official state grape, as I said.
Good. Do you want to talk about these wines that we have right in front of us? I know that we have one hot year, one more of a challenge year for Virginia. The two very untypical, as you just mentioned. And also, I'd love to hear you maybe talk about the winemaker and the perspective of the winemaker, which I think is very when we think of Virginia, I think in terms of maybe the larger picture of Virginia wines is that Virginia is not where California is or Washington or Oregon, but I think if you take a step back, you're going to learn about the winemakers, and they're coming from all over the world. So I think that's a true bellwether in many ways, that this area has a bona fide reason for being so.
Well, okay, so Luca Pasquina from Alba, Italy is the winemaker since 1990. One of the most recognized vintners in Virginia and actually the East Coast. These wines are in dozens of states in the U.S., and of course it's sold in China as well as in the U.K. Okay. Luca is very well known, and much like the Virginia wine industry, has received a lot of recognition, a lot of accolades in the last 2 years from national and international press. So too has Luca Pasquina, the winemaker at Barboursville. Just in the last year, he's been a James Beard semifinalist for Outstanding Wine, Spirits, and Beer Professional. Also, he was included in the 20 Most Admired People in Wine by Vineyard and Winery Management Magazine. And Dave McIntyre, who is the Washington Post wine critic, recently bestowed a big honor on Luca in his writing. I actually wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. Sorry, I got it right. He noted that Luca Pasquina is Virginia's premier winemaker at the helm of a winery that has found the magic combination of commercial and critical success. So that's a big honor bestowed by one of the nation's premier wine critics. And there's a lot more recognition that Luca has received, but he's one of the most notable because he continues year in, year out to produce wines that are memorable, wines that represent his vineyard and the land they have at Barboursville, which has a deep, deep history. The land is named for one of the first governors of Virginia, James Barbour. There's still Governor Barbour's home is still the ruins of the home is still there on the property. It was caught fire many years ago. Barbour, of course, was a contemporary of Thomas Jefferson, but the ruins of the home are still on the property. It's adjacent to the 1804 Inn, which is a historic inn that they have on the property. So Barboursville is just a fantastic place to visit for anyone in the that happens to be visiting Central Virginia. But I wish I could say that one of these wines represents a typical Virginia vintage. I don't know that Virginia has a typical vintage. Every year it's hit or miss. You know, there's a lot of challenges every year. If you look at average temperatures, high versus low temperatures versus humidity versus rainfall. Virginia has very high, as you know from 2011, very high temperatures, very high humidity. Yeah. The nighttime temperatures are still quite high in Virginia. Sure. They receive a lot of precipitation. We do as a state, a lot of precipitation in the critical months of August, July, August, September, October, lots of rain, more so than most other regions. Maybe Piemonte has similar humidity and rain, but not quite as much. Or in 2008, there were some early rains. There were some reports throughout the state in some regions that there were vineyard or fruit loss because of hail. In 29, actually, there was some hail damage as well. Not widespread, but there were some reports. And in 2010, that will go down as one of the hottest and driest vintages in Virginia. And I think that we'll be able to tell that through tasting the wines.
Okay. Your thoughts on this is, I'm fascinated. When I was in Virginia, yes, I've been there several times before, but it's a sense of patriotism. It's a sense of, the founding of the country, George Washington.
And this, by the way, is from the Monticello AVA.
Okay. And that is a really good segue to Jefferson. So Jefferson was this visionary, and he loved wine, of course. Never got to see Vitis vinifera on his estate, which is unfortunate, because I wonder what Jefferson would think today. I think, that's what, when I was walking through Monticello, I was thinking, boy, he would be excited to see what happened.
I agree. He is known as our first enophile. His travels through, Champagne, France, and Italy are legendary. He very well documented his travels and trips, and of course, he built Monticello, founded the University of Virginia, and tried to make wine, to grow grapes at Monticello. Sadly, that was not to be, just for a number of different reasons. Although now there are vineyards on the original planted now, and they're maintained by Gabriele Rossi there at Monticello on the original planting sites. So it is exciting. It's a great historical, educational and historical day if you visit and tour the vineyards. Gabriele Rossi, who was ironically the very first winemaker for the Zonin family at Barboursville.
Mm-hmm. Good. Also just visiting Charlottesville was really, I had been obviously in Northern Virginia, but being in the center of Virginia was really, these beautiful landscapes of these white picket fences where the horses are, it reminds me of the movie Giant. I think that was where one of the beginning scenes takes place. And I'm like, oh my God, Virginia is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, and producing beautiful wines, and a great food culture there as well. So, something I would echo and say you have to visit. Okay, so I want to introduce this bottle. It's a 2008 vintage Barboursville Cabernet Franc. And so this is the Reserve. This is a 13% ABV wine, and a beautiful label here. Back panel for your inspection here. Now, Frank's already has some in his glass. I'm going to pour myself a 2008. And so what we're going to do is just going to taste through together and give some comments on this wine here. And for me, Cabernet Franc was one of the first wine grape varieties beyond Cabernet Sauvignon that I just really fell in love with. I think there's so many different Cabernet Franc interpretations. I think there's really deeply herbaceous. There's that green bell pepper-ish quality, but there's something very original. I think when you're tasting Cabernet Franc, you're not tasting anything else, and that's the beauty of this one. So here we go. Sorry, Frank, I don't have my football helmet today to spit out of it.
Helmet. Okay.
Yeah. So I like the integration of this wine. I like that it's a really beautiful wine, and I like the forest floor qualities on the scent profile. Cedar, a little bit of leather. I don't typically get from a Cabernet Franc, excuse me, and I think that's the beauty of this wine here. I love the texture of this wine, the scent characteristics, the flavor characteristics on this wine give beautiful notation of a slight game quality, tayberry, which is one of my favorite descriptors of all time, a cross between a blackberry and a raspberry, so a really beautiful lift of fruit characteristics on this, and the spice characterization, also a bit of crushed red flowers on this wine, absolutely beautiful. You know, this is one of the wines, I have to say, with Cabernet Franc, you should really enjoy with food, but this is one where you can enjoy with food or without food. What are your thoughts on this one?
I will echo the spice and the tayberry. To me, this is, and you pick up little secondary hints of leather floating around. And I also get some black tea, which I appreciate. And I will admit some bias. Barboursville Cab Franc is one of my favorite in Virginia, and 2008 I really tend to enjoy. So again, just pretty much the same aromatic and flavor profile that you noted.
Absolutely beautiful. And then this one I would give a 9.3. I think this is a really beautiful, gorgeous Cabernet Franc that I think is really delightful. And, you know, I would really seek this out. So, as I always say, if you can't find this wine, you know, I'm going to put the producer Barboursville's website down below for those states that can receive Virginia wine. So onward, we're going to go to the 2009 vintage. And so we have another beautiful Cabernet Franc here. So closer inspection here, 2009 vintage. So Barboursville, Virginia, Cabernet Franc Reserve. And so before we actually pour this wine, I just want to give there's a note on here, a bit of copy. It says, Jefferson's Dream. Thomas Jefferson, a great lover of wine with the assistance of Italian viticulturist Filippo Mazzei, made an attempt to establish a vineyard in Virginia. 2 centuries later, Vitis vinifera plantings were successfully established in Barboursville. So I think this, and it also talks about the mansion destroyed that you just mentioned, Christmas Day 1884. So this great provenance of this authentic experience. So here we go, 2009. And Frank, the barrel program on this, is it a 100% French oak barrel program?
You know, with Barboursville, I believe I think the barrel program has changed, but the majority of it, I believe, is French.
Okay. And what I find very exciting is that the scent characteristics on this are completely different from the 08.
It is.
You know, on this I'm getting, you know, it's a tobacco, rose petal, violets.
Lots of crushed, dried flowers.
Yeah. And one of my favorite scent characteristics is plum orchard. So my aunt has a plum orchard, and it smells like this in fall time. So I like that. On this wine, I think it's just appreciable on all ends. And what I really enjoy is the flavor characteristics are, I would say, even markedly different from the scent profile. Yeah. On this, I'm getting outstanding notes of black, red plum, additional notes of cinnamon, Mexican cinnamon, cardamom, violets again come up into play here. But also really beautiful earthy characteristics. I don't know if it's quite a white mushroom characteristic, but there's a sense of earth on this and a sense of chocolate as well.
The spice and what you called earlier forest floor type of aromatics is definitely very predominant in this wine for me. And this is the 09 is quite different than the 28, which I believe 2010 will be even more different.
Okay. I'd say that this is a world-class wine. If I were to pick one of these, it would be the 2009. At least this is my indication so far. I did a pre-tasting on the 2010, but so far this is my favorite. So 9.4 out of my 10.0 scale. A beautiful wine. So this is a 2010 vintage. Now this is 14.5% ABV. So this is a different year, and so this is going to be different in terms of characterization, scent profile, flavor profile, and so I think that's what vintage is all about. Things do change over time.
And in Virginia, there is a saying. First of all, you know, there are some in Virginia that will compare Virginia to various other regions in the world, and I'm not. I don't agree with those comparisons because Cab Franc is so widely grown and made throughout the state. Some will compare, you know, Virginia's climate to that in the Loire, Central Loire, to Chamar-Sampigny or Chinon, and it's not when you actually compare climate data.
Sure.
But I believe that Cab Franc does as well in Virginia. So as you would expect from 2010 vintage, which was the hottest and driest vintage for many, many years in Virginia, this is what you would expect from that. A little larger, more heavier plum, cherry, darker cherry, more heavier spice, aromatics, and flavors.
Now, what's thrilling about this wine is that it's going to, I don't like to get into the discussion of hot because I don't think there's any heat on this. What I would give a notation on is I call this chili guajillo. Chili guajillo, what I mean by that is sweetness and spice. And that's the beauty of this wine. So sweetness, spice, again, the violet characteristics of a little bit of lavender, cedarwood is really playing into this, and really beautiful spice box notes of my favorite crushed cardamom and Mexican cinnamon. Beautiful wine. This is a 9.3 out of my 10.0 scale. Really enjoying these wines, Frank. Thank you so much for bringing them. I would like to know, what are your favorite things to serve with these wines?
For 2008, I would probably use just as a sipper, but with Cab Franc, I think it's a very versatile type of wine. We eat a lot of pork, so just a nice grilled basic pork chop is what I would pair with Cab Franc, which we generally do.
Sure. I'm thinking on these wines, for me, I'm thinking Spanish food. So don't think it's just American cuisine. Think of what broad cuisine stroke. Think of Italian food, in my opinion. Think of Mexican food is really one of my go-to wines, but I think this is a beautiful wine to pair with a variety of foods. And what my goal, I hope someday, is to see these wines lining the shelf here in San Francisco. Because I think if San Franciscans were able to taste these wines on a regular basis, they would be, it would be available everywhere. Here, a privilege to have you here. So thank you so much for being here. And so stay with me. I'm on most social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Vimeo, Google+, Pinterest, and Instagram. So for Frank,
drinkwhatyouLike.com.
There you go.
On Twitter, just drink what you like, and on Instagram, drink what you like.
There you go. And I definitely want to encourage you to follow Frank, and also his wisdom on Virginia wines, and his wisdom on wines from anywhere around the world is outstanding. So stay tuned for more. Thank you so much for watching, and again, more information will be listed down below. Cheers. Salud.